If you're looking for residence, citizenship, or lifestyle options, chances are you've heard about Europe's golden visa programs. Today I'm going to explain how they work, who they're for, and dispel some of the newest misconceptions. The idea of the so-called golden visa started about a decade ago with Spain and then Portugal rolling out what are called residence by investment programs, where you can get a residence permit in exchange for making an investment. Pretty straightforward. I generally think of golden visas, as much as the media applies the term golden visa, golden passport rather liberally. They don't really know exactly what it means, but I apply golden visa to a European residence by investment program that accomplishes two things. Number one, it gives you optionality, and number two, it gives you a path to citizenship. And I'm going to tell you why that's important and who might be interested in this. And then again, I'm going to dispel some misconceptions. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs who want to get dual citizenship, who want to reduce their taxes, and who want to protect their assets overseas. We also host the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live, where we teach people this stuff. And so a golden visa is going to give you optionality in the sense of you have the ability, because you're a resident of a European country, to live in that country as much as you want. So let's say you go and you get a golden visa in Portugal. You can live in Portugal 365 days a year. Now, even if you have a passport that gives you visa-free access to Portugal, let's say you're a US citizen or a Canadian or a Serbian or a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis through their citizenship program, you're going to get equal access to Europe's borderless Schengen area, which means you could spend all that time in Portugal or you could move around. But it's one big block of countries, and you get 90 days out of every 180 days. You can't spend more than half the time there, no matter how many passports you have. And so if you want more than that, you need a residence permit. Now let's ignore the fact for a moment that spending too much time in one country may make you a taxpayer, and there's a whole separate amount of tax planning that we've talked about in many other episodes. But if you want the ability to live in Portugal or Spain or Greece or Ireland or Latvia or Italy or other countries that have these programs, then a residence permit allows you to do that. But what a golden visa, in my mind, does differently than a lot of other residence permits that you would get for, having a job, for example, or through self-sufficient visas, freelancer visas, what have you. But the golden visa does is it sets a very low physical presence requirement, giving you the optionality that you can choose. Hey, this year we want to spend a whole bunch of time in the country. Next year we don't. You get to go back and forth. And so what that allows you to do is get your backup plan ready now, to where, hey, a lot of our clients say, I live in the United States. I'd like to be able to live in Europe in the future. I'd like to work towards European citizenship, but I can't commit to move right now. I've got kids graduating high school. I've got a business I'm selling, whatever. You get the golden visa set up. It may be, 1 day a year to keep that visa active. It might be 7 days a year. Something along those lines, where you do need to check in occasionally to keep the residence, but it's not like other residence permits that are thinking you're going to be there 6 months a year. What it also means is that you don't necessarily have to fall into the tax end of that country, so that you can keep paying taxes wherever you're living, or if you're living offshore, living the nomad capitalist lifestyle, you can have the golden visa and work towards citizenship without necessarily incurring a tax burden in that country. And that's the second part of a golden visa, is a path to citizenship. Now, not all of these do this equally. For example, Latvia, which recently canceled and then quickly brought back its program, not technically called a golden visa, but the media calls it that. You can go and buy property, you can put money in a bank in Latvia, you get a residence permit. The difference with theirs is you need to be there, if you want to qualify for citizenship, about 9 months a year for 10 whole years. You get permanent residence first, then you can apply for citizenship. So generally with golden visas, you're not shortening the time to get citizenship in a country to where it's not any more advantageous for you than it would be for someone who moves to that country and gets a job and spends all their time there. What they're doing is they're making it easier in some cases to get the citizenship. Not every country does that. So Latvia doesn't do it. Greece, as much as they say if you spend 6 months a year there, you can apply for citizenship in the future. Greece generally, in my opinion, has a hard time naturalizing people who aren't ethnically Greek. That whole kind of region has a similar issue. And so Greece, maybe not as reliable. Spain's going to be a long slog. But, Portugal, for example, you can spend a lesser amount of time there. And if you set things up properly, there are a few special things that you should do that we advise our clients on. But if you set things up properly, you can qualify for citizenship even without having to live there. So you've got a path to citizenship. But in either case, any of the golden visas give you a path to citizenship, which is why, I wouldn't put something like Andorra's residence program in the same category as a golden visa because it's going to take you 20 plus years to become a citizen of Andorra. That's not really the same thing. That's a place to live. Like you would live in Monaco, you live in Singapore, you live in Dubai, you live in Panama. You may not get citizenship in those countries, but you can enjoy living there. You can enjoy low taxes. A golden visa is a residence permit in potentially a high tax country where the high taxes don't apply to you if you don't live there. You always can keep in your back pocket the ability to move there and by extension, the ability to spend as much time as you want in Europe with certain restrictions on that. And if you want to qualify for citizenship in the future, you can. And so it makes it an interesting way for someone who wants a backup passport to their existing Western passport. If you're an American and you think, hey, I may not always keep my US citizenship, you can work towards one of these European citizenships, which are of equal quality. And plus, of course, if you're a citizen of an EU country, you can go and move to other EU countries at that point. So a Portuguese citizen could move to Ireland, right? Or a Latvian citizen could move to France. I mean, you have that ability. And so that gives you a lot of optionality. So that's how a golden visa works. So who would want that? Again, someone who values their time more than their money, either because they don't want, like in my case, do I want to commit to 6, 7, 8, 9 months in a country in Europe? I have other homes, I have business on other places. I just can't commit to that, but I would like the option to have a residence permit if I want to go and spend time in Europe. I get, to go in the faster line. I get to, I'm a resident. I mean, it's just kind of an easier process. And in exchange, there are some of these programs where they have halfway decent investments. You can buy property, you can invest in investment funds, you can put your money in the bank, you can buy government bonds. There are programs where you can invest in businesses, you can hire employees. So maybe you need to do some of these things anyway. And then you get that residence permit to Europe, and it's only 1 day a year, or it's 7 days a year. And so that makes it interesting. If you have, more time and less money, then you would go through a self-sufficient process where they're going to expect you to live there a certain amount of time every year. You're going to do your tax planning or just pay the taxes in whatever country you go to. Obviously, Portugal has certain tax incentives, which are a little Swiss cheese-like, but that could work. So which do you value more, time or money? If you value time more, if you're stuck in a particular country, if you can't commit full-time, the golden visa allows you the optionality and the path to citizenship without having to live there. That's who would look at getting this. And again, if you want that top-tier passport that's going to be a little bit higher quality and come with more flexibility than, let's say, a Caribbean citizenship by investment program, you can work towards them. It's not citizenship by investment we're talking about, and I'm going to talk about the misconceptions here. Malta has what they call exceptional investor program, which is an 18-month semi-direct citizenship program where you're going to make a big donation. It's going to cost you about $1 million plus, depending on your family size, when all the fees are factored in. And you're going to become a citizen of a European Union country in a matter of about 18 months. That's different than a golden visa where you're basically making an investment that will come back to you in the future, and then you're working your way to citizenship at the same pace as everyone else. You can move to Malta and become a citizen of Malta by living there and just becoming one of them the same way anyone else can. Their citizenship program makes that faster. That's not a golden visa, and that's not what we're talking about. Even though Malta has a residence by investment and a tax resident program, it becomes kind of confusing. And this is the thing that we help people with here at Nomad Capitalist. But I wanted to go through an article that I found. This is from a website called Business Review in Europe that talks about some of the misconceptions of golden visas. And the first thing they say is exactly what I just talked about. Many countries have been practicing the art of passport sale in return for economic developments. But a golden visa is not a citizenship by investment program. It's a residence by investment program. If you go and invest in Portugal, you are not guaranteed to get citizenship. Could they change the rules? I don't think that they will, but I guess theoretically a country could make it, instead of 5 years, now it's 7 years, right? They could do that. I don't necessarily foresee these countries doing it. In fact, Portugal has made some of their citizenship laws more flexible, right? They have a relatively flexible language requirement. They've made it easier to get citizenship for children that you have once you're a resident. And so I think that these countries are moving in the right direction, but you are not guaranteed citizenship. There are things that you need to do along the way. They may be relatively easy, but it's not like going to one of the Caribbean countries where in 6 months you're getting a passport. That's citizenship by investment. Residence by investment and golden visa means your conditions for getting in, your conditions for staying in are easier. Whereas, hey, if you just get a residence permit by having a job and they fire you, well, you may be out of the country. You're not in control. So if you have money, you can get your way in that way. And so the belief, here's the next misconception. The belief is that potential investors with the capacity to facilitate economic growth are more likely to be drawn by the allure of dual citizenship than any other business-related benefits. Listen, Having citizenship in the European Union and a country in the European Union certainly carries some benefits. There's certain properties you can invest in. There's certain business benefits, but a golden visa doesn't necessarily facilitate business, and it doesn't necessarily change your tax status unless you decide to live there. Remember, you can live in your golden visa country, right? And Portugal and Italy and Greece and Ireland all have certain tax incentive programs for foreigners, but I wouldn't necessarily compare it to doing it for business-related benefits. The next misconception they talk about is that the United States has reservations about golden visas. The United States has more reservations about citizenship by investment programs, but I'm sure they don't like the fact that anything is easy because big high-tax countries don't want you to have options. But what it says that's incorrect is the U.S. wants to cut off golden visa countries from its visa waiver program. I really haven't seen any evidence of that. I mean, if you become a citizen of Portugal or Ireland or Italy, the U.S. really hasn't said that they're going to target those countries because, again, they're not direct citizenship programs. And so I think that they're kind of misconstruing, once again, residence and citizenship. And so it says in simple terms, golden visa is a form of citizenship. Not true. Golden visas are provided by many countries around the world, and that's correct. Certainly dozens and dozens and dozens of countries around the world have residence programs where you can either show income, you can put money in the bank, you can buy real estate. I mean, there's many different criteria. Again, a residence program in, let's say, Costa Rica, theoretically, they may ask you to show you've spent a certain amount of time in the country after you make your much smaller investment than what they require in Europe. And so that's not kind of the same thing. European golden visas are kind of a league unto their own. And obviously, again, they give you a path to some of the best citizenships in the world. The next point is any wealthy foreign national can be granted a golden visa in a golden visa country. Individuals and their family members are granted indefinite residence permits in their country for as long as the investment holds. Relatively true, but not entirely true. They're not indefinite. They will be granted for 2 years and then you renew, or 3 years and then you renew, or 5 years, or even every year in a couple of cases. So it's not indefinite. Now, in some cases, once you've fulfilled a certain number of years in the program, then it kicks over to essentially a permanent residence and they just keep renewing it. But it's never really like, hey, never call us ever again. You're just good for life. You generally need to keep renewing them. What does a golden visa benefit beyond just the ability to stay in that country? Well, Europe, mostly is part of the borderless Schengen area. So if you fly to Portugal, you can drive to Spain or fly to Spain, and you're not going to go through a separate border check. And so they talk about in this article, visa-free movement through Europe. You can do that, but technically you are supposed to, have your base in the country where your golden visa is issued. You're not really supposed to have a Portugal golden visa and then go and live in Sweden. And I think people have encountered some difficulties in doing that because no one wants to rent you an apartment, for example, in some countries. And so it talks about a pathway to citizenship. It talks about the fact that golden visas, generally speaking, are in countries that do have visa-free travel to the United States. That is correct. And it says that they're quite pricey and that require people to live in their countries. Well, that's not true. You don't have to live in the country generally for what we would consider a golden visa. And is it pricey? Starting from about 250,000 euros. There are some that occasionally are cheaper than that. But if you just want a kind of pure play passive investment, 250 to 300, up to 500, up from there, €1 million sometimes, 2 million euros. But you can find plenty of golden visa options in the lower to mid 6 figures in euros. So is that pricey? Listen, it's perhaps a small price to pay to invest that amount of money to be on a path to citizenship, have access to Europe when people are paying $1 million to work towards citizenship in Malta in 18 months. If you've got a little bit of patience, but you still have the money to invest, it's a much better deal potentially for someone who has that extra time and isn't in a hurry. And so you don't, again, have to live in those countries, but you have that option. So you have Spain, you have Portugal, you've got Greece, you've got Cyprus, you've got, to a certain extent, Malta, Italy, Ireland, and Bulgaria has kind of a quasi-golden visa program. Lots of countries in Europe have residence programs. Some require investment. But again, a golden visa to me is time versus money. You make the choice. That is what you are getting into. And so you might get a golden visa in Europe on top of a citizenship by investment somewhere else, on top of some other citizenship somewhere else. What you need and what your goals are will specify where you want residence, where you want citizenship, how long you're going to wait for each. It's exactly what we help people do here at Nomad Capitalist, is figure out what you need without overpaying. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com, and now you know more about how golden visas work.